We're sitting down with an author, professor of philosophy, and currently a senior scholar at the Institute for Policy Studies, Andrew Levine. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for
Dr.
inviting
Levine.
me.
You contributed to a book. It's titled Hopeless: Barack Obama and the Politics of Illusion. What was the illusion, in your opinion, and how did it get hopeless?
Well, Obama, of course, campaigned on the idea of hope and the possibility of change. But he was skillful in turning himself into something like a Rorschach figure in which anyone could see whatever they wanted to see. Changes were not certainly ruptures with the past, and they dashed the expectations of virtually every constituency that supported him because they envisioned transformations of American domestic and foreign policy that were far more far-reaching than what Obama actually even attempted, let alone achieved.
As far as foreign policy, you're writing that President Obama's wars could come back to bite him, even the ones he didn't start, but which you argue are his by now. He pledged to withdraw from Iraq and Afghanistan. He says that's what he's doing. In what way could they bite him?
Well, they could all fall apart. In effect, the United States lost both of those wars even before Obama assumed office. But the imperative that Obama faced, which was also the imperative that George Bush faced in his final years, was not to lose face.
I'd like you to expand a little bit on Afghanistan. You argue that Afghanistan in particular has turned into a face-saving operation for the president. How is he handling that?
Well, to the extent that he can develop a consensus in the political class in the United States to get out as soon as possible, which seems to be happening not particularly through his own initiatives, he will get out. But unless that develops, there's going to have to be a continued presence there of some sort, which is going to continue to wreak murder and mayhem and not to achieve any of the official objectives that the United States put forward in entering into that conflict in the first place. Now, if that explodes, then Obama will look bad because the United States will look weak and it will look defeated, and that's not a recipe for success for someone who is embarked on an electoral campaign.
Aside from the wars already on the U.S. plate, you wrote that by far the biggest bullet for President Obama to dodge is a war against Iran. Yes. Do you think it might actually happen? I mean, experts, even in the U.S. government, say it's a crazy idea.
Well, it looks now like Obama has dodged that bullet at least until November by basically by buying off Israel with arms.
What do you think about the president's approach with regards to Iran when he's trying to cater to everybody, in a way, to the Israelis by saying that he would be ready to go to war, and to everybody else by saying that he actually doesn't like the drums of war and there's still a chance for diplomacy to work?
Well, I think the result is that although he may have succeeded in avoiding a war between now and the election, and maybe even afterwards, one could hope, the rationale for the war remains intact, and so the danger that events could transpire, which would reignite the danger and maybe even lead to the eruption of a war, remains real, and Obama hasn't effectively addressed that issue. I think this is an instance of a general problem with Obama's presidency, and it's partly why it's very hard for any of Obama's supporters to come up with any reason for supporting him, especially for supporting him enthusiastically in the upcoming election, other than that the alternative is so much worse. Because whatever he's accomplished that can, on balance, be given a plus, it's always encumbered by negatives that are very nearly cancel out the benefits.
The contenders for the Republican nomination, they have a pretty scary rhetoric when it comes to foreign affairs. Yeah. Everyone minus Ron Paul. They don't seem to have words political solution in their vocabulary.
Right.
And yet you called President Obama the most hawkish of the lot. Why?
Well, he's the most hawkish of the lot with respect to some issues and not with respect to all issues. His position on Afghanistan is, at least momentarily, probably more hawkish than that of Mitt Romney. They have all of them said that now is the time to get out. And Obama, as the steward of the empire, can't say that, and so he wants
also
to
said
maintain.
that.
Well,
he said gradually, yeah, we have
gradually to get out. Yes,
out.
gradually to get out. But that's different from getting out now, which was what even Newt Gingrich said.
On a different note, related to domestic politics, I want to ask you about the Occupy Wall Street movement and where you think it's heading. These people took to the streets to protest the culture of revolving doors in Washington, the cozy relationship between corporations and politicians, of unlimited contributions to political campaigns, which many see as legalized corruption. Do you think their voices were heard?
Yes, in a general, fairly diffuse cultural sense. I don't think you can that Wall Street banksters are cultural heroes anymore, the way that they used to be.
In terms of policy making, what about?
In terms of policy making, probably not. At least not with this administration so far. There was a backlash that took creative form and that led to a kind of awakening, a kind of consciousness raising. And where that goes now as the spring is coming and new forms of struggle are likely to emerge, and how that will interact with the political campaign, which
he has to respond to that.
Which
and
unfortunately,
he has. In his State of the Union address, for example, he would say that there's a need to keep the Wall Street in check, that it needs to be better regulated. He would say all those words.
He can say that, and then he can go right out and not keep Wall Street in check.
Soon, Americans will face a choice between Mitt Romney, most possibly, and Barack Obama, candidates from two parties, Democrat and Republican. You wrote that Romney's, and I quote here, awfulness will win the election for the Democrats. I want to ask you about the two-party system and the two-horse race that it established effectively. Do you think Americans have that much of a choice when electing a president? It's
sort of like Coke and Pepsi, and the level of antagonism that undoubtedly exists in the places where those things are manufactured and marketed. At the level of underlying political vision or underlying political orientation, there isn't that much difference, and Romney would probably be perfectly happy doing what Obama does. We have a media which is so thoroughly controlled, and all the institutions that manufacture opinion are so pervasive, and our electoral system has become basically like an advertising. It's become a sales promotions. There are brands and there are people trying to sell different products, one of two products. And it's a pressure that's it's not so much that it's a pressure that's hard to resist. It's a pressure that most people aren't even aware that there is an alternative and can't be made. That's what I wanted to ask. Is there a chance for a third product to somehow get into this? Well, historically, that only seems to happen to some small extent when the third product is backed by a huge amount of money, like when Ross Perot was running for president. And the Greens can't do that, and they're not going to have in 1992, backers. Right? That was in 1992, yeah. You know, according to one of the latest Gallup polls, a record number of Americans, 40% of Americans, identify themselves as independents. Yeah. That never happened, and they don't have their candidate, effectively. Right. We have a very profound disconnect between what people want in any meaningful and recognizable sense of the term, and what the political process offers in the way of alternatives. By the way that the party system has evolved, especially in recent years, that makes it, and by indefensible jurisprudence, which has made it increasingly possible for corporations and for very rich people effectively to control the political process. And under those circumstances, it doesn't matter that much what people want, or even that much how involved people are.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Levine.
Okay. Thank you.